welcome my observant indie hunters to the first review on this channel, and seeing how this is the first, let's lay down some rules on how this works. Reviews are made if an observation or a first impression was already done, or if it was suggested, or better yet, if it was just me wanting to play the game. We'll be taking the rating that I already set in the observation and seeing what the final score is in this review. The ratings are to completely ignore it, to just play it, or to pay and own it. Today we have Born of Bread, for which I've scored it a full attention beforehand in my observations. So all that's left now is to go through the full game, for which I was provided with by Dear Villager, the publisher for WildArts Studio Inc, who created Born of Bread. And just as a disclaimer, even though I was given a copy of Born of Bread, I am not being paid to make this video, I'm not paid to make this review. Everything that happens and everything that I say in this video is all my opinion. But forewarning, there will be repeated info you may have heard if you watched my observation video on the demo. All for clarity, of course, just so I don't miss anything. But to be sure, I do have timestamps in the video, so if there is a section you wish to skip, here's the table of time and content. You can look in the description below for the video times as well, and links to the sources if you're curious. Oh, and I know I just made this channel and I know I only have 100 subs, but there is a link to the Indie Observer's Patreon if you wish to support the channel. Any and all support will go back to this channel, and it'll help me reach my goal of being a full-time YouTuber, if that ever happens. I'd also implore you to subscribe to the channel if you want to see more reviews on indie games, and to get full updates on games I'm looking at, check out the Discord link in the description if you're interested. Anyway, I think it's time for us to head into the kitchen as we review what I would call a spiritual successor to the best Paper Mario game thus far. Well, I shouldn't say thus far, it was the 1,000-year door, and I will take no other opinion because I know I'm right. But without further ado, let us begin. Born of Bread is developed by WildArts Studio Inc, and taking a look into their past, you'll find that they officially started on the website itch.io. It was there in 2017 when they released a horror game called Helltown, and yeah, I said I wouldn't play it because I'm a pansy coward who doesn't like to play horror games. and that still holds true, but gosh darn it, if I'm going to make a review, I need to be thorough. On the webpage, the game is described as thus. In Helltown, you play as a postman who has to deliver packages to the residents of a brand new residential development called Little Vale. However, when all hell breaks loose, you have to run away and hide from insidious monsters while trying to unravel the truth behind it all. In order to do so, talk to the townspeople and explore the game's many locations. Will you be able to escape? Or will you just be another lost soul trapped in Helltown? Yeah, so instead of playing the game, I decided to look up a video on someone who did play it, Super Horror Bro. He's a channel that plays horror games and details the lore behind them. I'm actually a bit of a fan of Super Horror Bro. I loved his Little Nightmare series. And funny enough, I played those games, but I don't know, I don't think Little Nightmares is any much of a horror game as it is a stealth adventure to me. Well, after watching the video and still not wanting to play it, I recognize the intention to detail within the story. Though there is only one happy-ish ending, it does put their ability to tell a story on the forefront. If you guys want to know more about the lore and story of Helltown, I would suggest looking up Super Horror Bro's video. Actually, I'll put the link in the description if you are curious. Helltown is available for purchase if any of you are interested. From what I can tell, it was a small project compared to Born of Bread. This may have been a sort of test of their skills. So with talent like that, you'd think they'd go on to make another horror game, right? No, they instead took to making a game inspired by Paper Mario. But don't worry, they held some of the creepy stuff in Born of Bread. You'll find it somewhere later in the story, although humor is more or less the skin of their horror. WildArts first updated the public about Born of Bread in 2021, having a standalone demo and then an update to said demo. A lot has changed since then, but just by looking at these screenshots, you can tell they've been refining Born of Bread since then. Now, as everyone on the team is invaluable in the creation of the game, I do want to point out that their true leader, Chi-Chi, also gets their hands dirty. Yes, I'm making the same joke as I did in my observation making the dog the true leader of the team, but who knows, she might actually be. This French-Canadian group already look like they're making games for the sake of fun, something I admire in all indie developers. I believe when it comes to independent groups, the goal is more focus on games the developers themselves would love to play. And it's not like AAA games aren't like that, but it certainly is saturated with a lot of garbage that makes games uninspired, uncreative, and outright a bore or a chore to play. For this, I tip my hat off to WildArts for being a new favorite I intend to follow, especially seeing how their community seems to be very humbling and a lot of funny stuff happens there. Now, WildArts has this thing about communication, or should I say community involvement. The itch.io had already a community within their posts, even an ask for a collab. Well, it's not like they're above collabs or Easter eggs. Looking at this poster already tells me that. I mean, look at this. This is just too good. But going over their Twitter, X, you know what? No, this is off script here. I really don't care about the whole it's X now thing, shenanigans. X is a dumb name, so I'm gonna call it Twitter. Anyway, their Twitter is actually very entertaining. They find ways to make their posts and their responses as funny as possible, and having this kind of relationship with their fans is always a good thing in my book. Having already interacted with them with a couple messages, they have both a professional and fun side with their professionalism. Explains why their Twitter lives on the fun side of the internet. As far as I could tell, them making Born of Bread was more or less a passion project. A passion project that will activate nostalgia bombs in the minds of a bunch of 28 to 35-year-olds all around. They made Helltown as a test of their skills. They revealed Born of Bread in 2021 while finding their way into the hands of what I could tell is an excellent publisher, Dear Villagers. And as far as the games they publish, well, we'll get to that. I think I should move on to Dear Villagers actually, because even if they are just a publisher with no creative output on Born of Bread, they are still the current home for Born of Bread and are the partners to WildArts Studios Incorporated. So WildArts and Dear Villagers, take my sign of doing research on you guys as a sign of love. Okay, Dear Villagers is actually a subsidiary of their parent company Plug-in Digital, a French video game publisher founded in 2012 by Francis Ingrand. 7 years later, they relocated to Montpellier, and I hope I said that right because my French is horrible. I live in America. Fuck yeah! Focusing on helping studios and publishers with digital distribution initially, handling all the boring marketing, sales, and distributions as I said. They then expanded into China in 2019, acquired Black Shell Media publishing operations in 2021, taking over their contracts, tried announcing an NFT, which they canceled in 2022, a blessing in disguise in my opinion, and acquired a game development studio called Celsius Online in 2023. Fun fact, Dear Villagers wasn't always Dear Villagers. They were at first known as Playdius, renaming themselves as Dear Villagers on February 28, 2019, while also announcing they will have new titles in their lineup at that year's GDC, or the Game Developers Conference. They are credited with being one of the largest independent video game distributors that, at the time of their renaming, raised over $2.25 million, for which they primarily used to push their publishing strategy as Dear Villagers. And as I'm looking at their track record, yeah, I think their strats are pulling weight. And I knew something was up when I saw Edge of Eternity on their list. I may have had dealings with Dear Villagers as a customer. Anyway, as I was already graced with their kindness with Born of Bread, I hope they take my application for being on their press list and maybe some sponsorship for their games in the future. Who knows? I'll work on this, meanwhile they'll work on publishing more great indie games so I can play them. KK? And as I said in my observation, they feel like a humble home for indie developers to turn to. I just hope they stay away from NFT ideas. Knowing their parent company, I'm sure they'll be fine. So if anyone here is interested with anything that you see on this list, I'll leave a link below for you guys to enjoy. Okay, so that was WildArts Studios Incorporated and Dear Villagers, the developers and publishers respectively. As for the composer, as of this video, Robert Kilpatrick has yet to fill out his SoundCloud. However, his LinkedIn is very much fleshed out. Currently working for WildArts Studios Incorporated as their composer, this man has been a freelance composer for just over 12 years. He's been a voice teacher, a studio engineer, a producer. This guy is obviously talented, and I'm not sure if he has ever played a Paper Mario game, but his work from every area to every conversation scenario just oozes Paper Mario's whimsical feel. It's not a one-for-one emulation of what Paper Mario exudes, but instead his own interpretation of cartoon whimsy. Paper Mario implements the same feeling of whimsy while also taking from their own familiar music found in the Mario series. There is no mistake when you hear Shooting Star Summit. But when you hear Where the Roots Run, you think the composer may have collabed with the people who made Paper Mario's music or something. The Born of Bread OST is on the WildArts Studio Incorporated YouTube channel if you guys want to take a listen. Though I'm not sure if that's the whole soundtrack, I believe that's a good number for which you can sample and hear for yourselves just how good it is. Here's where I wish I was a music engineer. I could point out the score and elaborate just what they did to make this sound so good, but I can't, and I suck for that. I can, however, recognize emotion in music. Very basic, of course, but as you listen to both Shooting Star Summit and Where the Roots Run, you feel a sense of mystical energy, a mysterious area, but one of hope and of sort of cosmic wonder. Both scores exudes that energy, just like how Royal Town pushes for a peaceful kingdom filled with happy folks who just want to live their peaceful lives. Rogueport in Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door pushes this vibe of adventure by the seaside, a place with danger at every corner, and people who are tough as nails. To me, comparing the two is a compliment to say anything for Robert Kilpatrick's talent, but I understand that comparing should only be surface value. I wholeheartedly believe Born of Bread's composer will go somewhere, matching everything I've encountered in-game with beautiful background music, not just appropriate, but also fitting to a giant, bold font T. So kudos to Robert Kilpatrick. Fill out that darn SoundCloud so I can hear more of your music, damn it. And I still feel sad. If I had more knowledge about music theory, I could go on with my appreciation for Born of Bread's OST. Not that I don't already have said appreciation. I mean, when I go to the mountain summit full of peaceful monks, I hear the proper music. When I go into a mine, I feel the appropriate setting. And when I go into a creepy area for which I will not spoil yet, the area feels that much more unsettling. So the music is mwah. Chef's kiss. I think knowing the people behind a game is good for everyone, seeing the talent, the home, the vibe that brings everything together. Born of Bread has a ton of talent, and the producer makes me want to check out their library of games. Let's hope we hear more of all of them in the future, especially WildArts Studio Inc. I'm not too happy in spoiling stories for those who want to experience the game for themselves, so as far as I go into the story, I will stop somewhere midway or before that. The game is too new for the narrative to be known by everyone. I honestly think games like these need to be experienced rather than told. So I will talk about the story, but I will also talk about the framing, pacing, deeper details, quests, and potential lore. In my observation of Born of Bread's demo, I pointed out quite a few comparisons to events that happened in Paper Mario. Of course, there are more. Know that these comparisons are more of a compliment rather than a bout of criticism. Reason for that is how WildArts spun their own events that feel inspired rather than being a copy, and how those inspirations may push creative ideas that Paper Mario themselves could stand to emulate for their series. Okay, the story starts in a kitchen, a royal kitchen, used by the royal chef Papa Baker. As he was making the queen's meal for the night, Papa Baker is interrupted by a guard who explains that the queen wishes for bread tonight. Goaded into making the meal, Papa Baker whips up the ingredients and threw it into the oven. What happens next is nothing short of a what the moment as a small boy pops out of the oven naked and already talking. Taken aback by the moment, Papa Baker takes immediate responsibility by taking him in, naming him Loaf, clothing him, then abandoning him in the kitchen while he explains to the queen why her meal is not finished yet. This man just left a newborn child in a kitchen by themselves, unsupervised. That is not a good idea. So, with no parent supervision, Loaf takes off to explore the castle while destroying things in his wake, procuring a shiny stone he just so happens to find on the floor. Making his way upstairs, he finds his father being yelled at for creating a life instead of creating a dish. And in the middle of yelling, 5 cronies bust through the door claiming to have business with Loaf. Loaf defends himself, but unfortunately, being born only maybe 3 minutes ago, he gets his butt thwomped, they take the sunstone, and he gets thrown out the window. This is where the game truly begins. Upon waking up, Lo finds his father and makes their way back to the castle town. And for whatever reason, Papa Baker gives him a druidic scythe. Father of the year, ladies and gentlemen. They then end up discovering a campsite where a small raccoon named Lint pops out of nowhere claiming to be lost. He explains that he's been there for a while, supposedly, and needs help finding his way out, for which Papa Baker and Loaf obliges. After giving Loaf a map, they walked further to the right and made it out of the forest. Making their way back to Papa Baker's shop, the father, Chef, is then arrested in conspiracy to hurt the queen. Loaf and Lint try to defend the baker, but to no avail, seeing how the queen is kind of a bitch. Loaf and Lint were then confronted by some scholars to meet them inside the castle. It is explained there that these odd explorers may have proof to free Papa Baker. Now, in order to explain that, let's rewind a bit. True beginning of the game takes place in a dark forest next to some coffins. 3 explorers, the scholars, and their unpaid worker investigate these 5 coffins. One of them somehow needed to start the plot, so he opened one up, of course, on the request of the other scholars. A huge explosion takes place and 5 beings burst out, asking where they could find something called a sunstone. After one of them says they could sense one near, they whisked off to invade the castle and interrupt the queen's mealtime. Luckily, the scholars had taken a photo of the situation and believes that all the proof they need is there, plus they wanted the photo back. Loaf and Lint agrees and off they went, but first, Loaf and Lint had to stop at a heroes guild. It's called the Savers Guild, and it's an important place for heroes to beat up because they can get themselves a saver. There they meet Dub, a tiny dragon who is an oddity compared to his fellow co-workers. Dub does not use a pen and paper for his job, but instead uses modern technology to save and record the progress of heroes. You see, Dub is one of these savers, a person who's responsible to record every event a hero experiences, good or bad. Basically, they are the save system of the game, and they kind of know it. Dub introduces himself to Loaf and Lint, and they set off to the forest ruin so that they might be able to help free Papa Baker. Their trip is interrupted, however, when they come across a village that's pretty much dead silent. This is Lapwing Village, and apparently they are at war with their neighbors. The party try to get past these problems and meet the scholars at the point of meeting. However, another problem arises. The elevator taking them down into the undergrowth had no power, and the only way to get it back on was to ask the badgers to turn the electricity back on. So that means that they have to dig their nose into a business that they have no right to get into, but they need to make it to that camera. Loaf and Lint barely make their way to a couple who aren't a couple, but are a couple because tell of a way to stop their fighting, if not permanently but just temporarily. They just need to ring this gong. Loaf and Lint once again walk out into the fire, since leeks were the weapons of choice here, I don't know why, climb on top of a stand, retrieve the mallet to hit the gong. After settling things down, Lint convinces the elders to hold off on the war while they find out what's going on in the mines. Apparently the badgers were behind due to some rebellious interference. Loaf and Lint agree to stop this Lapwing rebel strike force and bring them out of the mine. Now, I have to implore something here. Throughout this video, you will see that I did not get an item that allows for one to see an enemy's health. Every battle that you will see, there won't be this red bar telling me how much health an enemy has. Before going into the mine, I'm not really sure if you could do it before or after, the mound here where Lint can uncover a chest, get it, because that is the only way to see the health of enemies. For me, however, I somehow went the entire game without it. I basically was in old school mode, you know, when enemy health isn't in your face like that of RPGs back in the 80s. I personally had no problem with it since I can make a mental note on the health of every enemy I come across, but for young folk who don't like using math, dig this mound up, get that item, and have access to those precious enemy health bars. I, for one, did a world first without it, baby. And I may have forgotten to dig it up the whole entire time. Oops. Okay, so in the mines they go, finding more weapons and discovering that the rebel group had cut the wiring while trying to sabotage the badgers to run them out of town. It backfired, of course, but nonetheless the problem was solved and the trio was able to get the power back on. Yes, I am counting Dub. Making their way back to the scholars, they discover that they went on by themselves. Following in their tracks, Loaf and Lint make their way down into the undergrowth to search for the evidence they need. What they discover while down there, however, is a lot of corruption and ruins that belong to a prior empire. Seems these ruins were the point of research for the scholars, but that wasn't important right now for Loaf. Making their way to the camera, they are confronted by a huge wood guy and are forced to defend themselves. The wood guy started fighting them due to a misunderstanding, blaming Loaf and Lint for attacking him, describing the attackers as small, purple, on fire, and mean. Yep, that checks out here. As an apology, the wood guy vouches for Papa Baker's innocence by writing a horribly written yet understandably passionate letter, oozing sincerity in every scribble. The trio, however, needed to take a break due to Dub's laptop running out of power, and thus we take to leaving Lowe's party for a bit and checking out on the flame guy, who we now know as Jester. Jester and company are seen wandering the ruins looking for clues on the next sunstone, realizing that they really are in an age where everyone has forgotten about their empire, as it has already disappeared. They now live in a peaceful era where there is no empire, no invasion, no conquering, no power, and no home. Jester, being very pushy about reviving the empire, tells his group to keep looking around. Here you take control of Jester to learn a little bit about him and his group. As they look around, they learn that the ruins are indeed their old home. Jester laments this, but he understands the mission that was given to him by his father. After this scenario, we go back to Loaf at the campsite, and they make their way back to town, where they convince the queen, not from the photo mind you, but the illegible note the wood guy gave him, to release Papa Baker. I guess sincerity in every word does work. Anyway, after Papa Baker is released, he is basically put on probation until they catch the true criminals, and to help with that, Papa Baker uses the supremely rare ingredient they got from the wood guy to give Loaf his second special. With the blessing of Papa Baker, Loaf and company, yes, that includes the invaluable Dub, make their way to the scholars for their next clue to locate another sunstone. Along the way, Loaf will meet odd characters and make even odder friends. Okay, so I think here's a good point to stop the story talk. As you may have guessed, in this game they are taking quite a bit of inspiration from the Paper Mario series when telling their story. You may have recognized the bit where Papa Baker and Loaf were thrown out the window after a fight. The same happens to Mario in Paper Mario, where Bowser uses a star rod to make himself invincible and thoroughly trounce Mario. Mario is sent out of the window, where he falls in a forest and recovers in a small village with a family of Goombas. The same thing happens to Loaf. He finds his dad, meets a raccoon, and makes his way back to town, much to the like of Mario, who picks up Goombario and heads back to Toad Town. The story beats work for Born of Bread and basically gives a shout out to its Paperverse predecessor, or should I say the Paperverse father. And yes, I'm still using Paperverse to describe the genre, or I could go Paper RPG, though Paperverse still sounds a bit better. Born of Bread's story is also very well paced while going through every scenario. A lot of the central events are told quite moderately for both kids and adults. Kids can keep up with the pacing of the scenes, and adults can be reassured that scenes aren't too long. Much to the like of Mario, Loaf is a silent protagonist, but unlike Loaf, Mario is very much a blank slate or a plank of wood. Heck, looking closely at Paper Mario, you might be able to see him breathe, proving once and for all that he has a soul, I think. I don't think you can compare Loaf with Mario, seeing how he is very expressive in almost every conversation. You can tell if Loaf is happy, worried, frightened, or mad, whereas Mario... a very much welcome adage to this paper-inspired RPG. Now, beyond Loaf, we have a few of the companions that I would like to talk about. I will, however, skip the last partner because I think that would spoil a lot of the plot. But so far, as you see on this cover, you have Lint, Yagi, and Chloe. What I like about Lint is his nervous nature and loyalty to Loaf. I see him as more or less the Paper Luigi that Paper Mario needs at his side. Like, Luigi has only really been playable in Super Paper Mario, so I think this is a very much needed thing. I like Lint. He's meant to be the best friend, voice of reason, and kind of the voice for Loaf. Loaf doesn't talk too much, but he does have responses, quite a few of them, and they're almost all filled with puns as an option to answer. I can tell that someone over in WildArts Studios really like their puns. Lint, in this manner, is shown to be a writer. He loves writing stories, but doesn't seem to see how talented he is, his modesty being one of his best qualities. Lint is also a drama queen in some points, over-exaggerating in some emotions, while still being the voice of reason. I'd say Lint should be the best friend, and show up in the next game if they make a sequel. If they make a sequel, especially due to his character growth within the game. He starts out a bit of a coward, but as he stays by Loaf's side, he becomes more outspoken looking and eventually tough enough to even scare Jester away. As far as a sidekick character goes, Lint is great, but as a companion, buddy, and loyal friend to him and his, he's a fine character within the story. But then there's Yagi. Now, he's a strange one for me. At first, I thought he was nothing more than a big-headed jerk who rushed into problems that are over his head. And for a good bit of the story, yeah, he was that. But Yagi was way more than what I expected. A fighter, and just as loyal. Yagi wanted strength to defeat any challenge, but along the way he realized what true strength really meant. Part of his kit when traversing is to meditate and bring phased out objects into our world. Being able to be a hothead, but also having the patience to meditate was something that goes in line with his true nature. You meet Yagi along the way while you're trying to enter a tournament to win the Sunstone as a prize. You find Yagi stuck in one of Jester's traps meant for Loaf, and a not so subtle callback to when Cammy Koopa, Bowser's aide, interrogated Princess Peach on Mario's weaknesses. It only happens here though, so I believe this was just a shout out for that moment. Yagi joins Loaf in the tournament, showing his character of a fighter of justice, even though he wasn't sure what his justice was. You also meet Yagi's childhood rival, who was once his friend. Their relationship in the game is what really spelled out Yagi's personality for me, because every so often you would meet this guy and fight him with Yagi to prove some sort of point. I mean, there is one, but I won't say anymore. Yagi also isn't some sort of annoying hothead. While he does like fighting, he's also quite level-headed, though due to being so expressive as he has a habit of making weird faces, Yagi will even in battle make faces for no reason other than just because. He does this due to his fiery spirit, but it just comes off as hilarious whenever someone riles him up, or if anything, him trying hard to be expressionless. Now, the last partner I will talk about comes in during the latter half, that partner being Chloe. She's a detective, plain and simple. She lives in a manor that is haunted by spirits, and it is here where a certain mechanic takes place. As the legend goes, this manor was cursed by some old ancestor of Chloe to trap any would-be thief who has the intention to steal something. The spirits in the house will trap everyone inside except Chloe, because she's hanging out with Plot Ex Machina. The spirits will not harm the immediate family, but will harm everyone else, including Loaf and his pals. The thing here is, Chloe joins you to solve this mystery and find a way to free her family. This means she also joins you in fights. As a speaker or someone who does sleuthing or detective work, I don't know, I guess she attacks with words, I'm not too sure. The cool thing here, and I'm not sure if this was intentional, but the enemies never attacks Chloe while you're in the manor. You encounter imps, possessed dolls, and even a walking oven, but none of them actually hurts Chloe. It's different outside the manor where she's free game, but within those walls, the spirits truly do not hurt the family. A very clever design for something they didn't have to do. Chloe as a character is very interesting. She plays herself as a detective and is actually quite good at it. Loaf has no clue what she deduces half the time, but Chloe does prove her worth. She's more like the thinker and planner of the group, brings her smarts to help solve clues along the way. As a character, she also goes through growth, but not as her learning anything, well, not much. She wants to prove that she can hold her own as a detective to her very doting parents and all of her family, her mother being a seance practitioner and her father being a businessman. The only family members believing in her skills being her grandmother and her brother. And her uncle is kind of a dick. You'll find out why. The characters you encounter along the way also prove to be right for this world, being cartoony and fun. You have a couple of copy-paste features in terms of body types with different NPCs, but they're fine because they have different faces and different personalities. And it's definitely like how Paper Mario has been going in the recent series, where every single freaking toad are basically copy and pasted everywhere. So I'm glad there's some variety in here, at the very least. And when going into the Savers Guild, you meet some fun characters as well, though it does introduce some lore within the game. Like these two, for instance, both used to date in the past, and in front of others seem to not get along. But secretly, these two have been seeing each other in a secret room inside the dungeon, some spicy secrets this lady doesn't want us to share. And though I haven't said much about the ruins before, they are sort of an inspired take from the Thousand Year Door, as it also has a sunken ruins underneath the main town. Of course, you'll learn more as you play the game. Lore bits are hidden all over the place, and references too. See if you can spot them all. So, as the story goes, it holds its own. Not everything in the game is inspired by the flat Mario. Plenty of the story beats are its own original spin, and some of it is quite funny if I may add. I will say that because the game is indie, it does come up a bit short for me, as I clocked in about 20 hours after trying to get everything, and I couldn't complete the game due to some issues. I believe it may be because I got a press copy. Some missions could not be completed due to some bugs. The Papa Baker quest where you had to get some ingredients to inspire him was odd, since I couldn't find the last ingredient, and due to that I couldn't finish this other quest that helps this other chef by sharing his samples throughout the town. Unfortunately, due to Papa Baker being the last person you have to give the samples to, and he was still in that unfinished quest where I had to get the ingredients, I couldn't finish either quest. Now, that's not much of anything compared to being unable to finish your partner's personal quest. You see, each one of your companions have a personal quest that involves them interacting with special locations and special NPCs. I was able to get 2 of them done, but Yagi's messed up at the end where his rival wouldn't initiate the last event, and Lynn's quest got bugged so bad that I could no longer enter an area where I needed to finish his quest. It basically crashed the game every time I entered this forest. Hello, Sank Weaver from the future, and I just want to tell you that I did finish up Lynn's personal quest. I don't know what happened. Maybe there was an update along the line. Maybe it's because I cleaned my computer, but I was able to go into that area and finish his personal quest. I was able to do it. That is the update. But don't let that stop you from doing them. They are the only ways to get their last ability on the skill tree, so it's better to do them. Either way, the story is full of color, fun events, clever moments, and deeper meanings to each character's story, especially when it comes to Jester and his character arc. And I can say no more about any of that. You'll just have to play the game in order to know his story. I can only imagine how many people tried Born of Bread for the fact that it plays similar to that of Paper Mario, and I will admit, that's why I played the game myself. The act of wanting to play a game due to nostalgia can lead to many disappointing moments. I've tried playing games like Sonic Superstars only for the game to come up a bit short, and there are reasons for that. On a side tangent, Sonic the Hedgehog was one of my favorite games I've ever played. I started with Sonic 1 and made it all the way up to Sonic Frontiers, my favorite for a long time being Sonic 3 and Knuckles. The game is old, like 90s old, and was one of the best moments I had in my life, just having fun with my weird looking SEGA device and dying on the flying battery all the time, never really getting past that. The purpose for video games, in my opinion, is to be entertained with the time you want to use. Nowadays, games are used to capture and raise kids and adults alike to accept the new ways of gaming, filled with AAA games that are tailor-made to waste time and throw rewards at players who either spend their time doing repetitive things or spend money to skip all that. Purity of retro games like Sonic Superstars has an appeal to older folks like me, the generation who lived through the golden age at the best times of our lives. They say that we're living in the platinum age of gaming. They couldn't be farther from the truth, especially when it comes to AAA games. Sure, we have great ones for sure, but we still have poison in the well. Sonic Superstars was basically made to be easy for newcomers but cater to veterans of the series. Doing that is hard, very hard. What SEGA did was use nostalgia to try and make a Sonic game that would have older folks like myself who will try the game and hopefully share their experience with the younger crowd. The problem with nostalgia in this case is that it was implemented horribly. Though some great things were added to this game, they also kept what made Sonic a bit of a difficult game to get into. A camera that is centered in on the character makes it hard to see what's ahead, and keeping the enemy on the road as a means to obstruct the player with a challenge as an obstacle? Yeah, that's still archaic. I don't really like those. The design for a lot of these stages aren't so good due to old Sonic tropes, meaning nostalgia actually made Sonic Superstars worse. Paper Mario is the inspiration for Born of Bread, so a lot of what you see can be compared to those games. The combat system, the world's aesthetic, the characters, and even the story. However, due to the simplistic nature of the gameplay and how unique it is compared to other RPGs, Born of Bread is only complementing the game by bringing it here in the modern day. You can also thank Bug Fables for doing exactly the same thing. But anyway, I bring up nostalgia for one reason, justifying a game's existence. Born of Bread has a very similar battle system as Paper Mario's turn-based battle system, with action commands for extra damage. Paper Mario not being the first to do something like this, since Super Mario RPG was a thing back in the day. But even during its own time, you had games like The Legend of Dragoon, which had a more of a different spin when it came to their battle system. If anybody remembers The Legend of Dragoon, shout that out in the comments below. But The Legend of Dragoon's battle system had you pressing a button at the right time when a square lights up in the middle of the screen, allowing the character to do longer attack chains, doing more damage. What I'm trying to say here is that the battle system for Paper Mario, nay, for all the Mario RPGs, are not exclusive. They don't own the rights to it since it's so close to other battle systems and RPGs. They honestly added an extra button to the damage process. And because I've said all this, put out examples, and made you remember about a long lost game, I can honestly say that Born of Bread's battle system is pretty good. Not great, not bad in any way, but pretty good. And though I'm praising this game and it hits my nostalgia, I have to be fair, can't really lean on my bias. Born of Bread's combat is pretty good, meaning it's responsive, simple to use, and anyone can master them. The only downside is there isn't enough variety. There are, if I'm counting correctly, like 5 different actions in battle. Some that involve stopping on green in different ways, some that involve staying in the middle of a target board, some involving pressing the right buttons in a row, even one that has you controlling a weapon and making sure it falls on the target. All these actions are fine. Some get harder depending on the weapon or ability. And as for resources, will points are used for both Loaf and his partners, much so like a flower points in Paper Mario. He also has RP or resolve points, which allows him to use his specials. I'd say specials are absolutely situational. They range from stat increases, resource management, buffs, and debuffs, even attacking with a pie. But as it goes, if you play right, the specials aren't really needed too much, but it's there for those who need an extra kick. I should probably talk about how these abilities are accessed. Loaf is different from his companions, where he uses weapons. His companions use a skill tree, and you use skill points in order to unlock more of the skill tree. Each companion has the same amount of skills within their tree, but there are different tiers and you can only use one skill from each tier. The last tier being unlocked and usable after you complete a companion's quest. And as I said about Loaf, he uses weapons instead of abilities. He uses different elements that have their own strengths. Loaf can find these bows, swords, knives, hammers, and rollable objects with different elements all over the world. The different elements are shown here in the Savers Guild, but if you have the boon that shows weaknesses, you don't really have to remember or try to memorize the weakness of an enemy. What I like is the Resident Evil 4 style backpack, where you have to try and fit all the weapons you want to have accessible in battle. If they are not in the backpack, they will not be used in battle. So when you have something like this sitting in the middle of your pack and you want to change it up so you can use this cool looking hammer that features a unique element, well, you better have good eyes for patterns, because your most wanted weapons may be too awkward to fit in the pack. Most of these weapons are hidden in chests, some of them are rewards from quests. Loaf has access to potentially every element in every weapon style. Oh yeah, this symbol here represents the type of weapon effect your ability has. Sword, hammer, arrow. They're also on the weakness chart, but with the weakness scope boon, you don't really have to worry about that chart. I will say that having weakness is something like a staple for RPGs, and I'm glad to see it. Games like Final Fantasy always had something like this, and I believe some Mario RPGs as well. Each partner has their own abilities with their own themes. Lint has his skills in being a writer, throwing paper, summoning fire to burn his failed work, even reciting passages from his stories with various effects on the enemies. Lint, however, is mostly a leaf element, so changing partners will be needed or at least wanted. I'd say Lint is more of a balanced fighter with a lot of group damaging skills, though I wouldn't look down on his damage. His full HP count is nothing to laugh at either. This here has reminded me to say that switching on who goes first in battle is done in the menu. Lint could go first, and since he is so well rounded, having all types of range and even heals, I personally think he is well suited as a tank. Yagi on the other hand is a straightforward fighter. Yagi boasts power over anything else, which means he's not the best at taking damage. He even changes faces when he attacks something. Yagi also introduces the button press timer action, where buttons show up in a circle to be pressed at the right time or pressing them in a sequence. Yagi's deal is that he is a fiery fighting monk, having fire and psychic elements as his mainstay. This does mean that he is also not that expensive for will points, but is somewhere in the middle. Chloe, the last one I'll talk about for now, has a lot of skills that hinders the opponent. Because she's a detective and loves to talk someone's ear off, most of her abilities can put them to sleep or debuff their stats. And she loves to do it with a group of people, so when it comes to making your own turn advantage, Chloe is your girl. The only thing you need to watch out for is how expensive she is. Chloe doesn't really bring anything new in terms of action commands, but she does like her target boards. And as I said before, your partners are upgradable in the skill tree. The only way you can earn those skill points are finding these little salamanders that are hidden all over the world. I'm fairly sure that every partner can be maxed out on their skill tree, so just keep an eye out for those salamanders. You'll know they're near if you hear snoring. The way you use your companions may turn the tide of any battle. It's up to you on how to use them though. Just don't forget to do their side quests, for it unlocks their final abilities on their skill trees, and they are all fairly powerful. Also make sure you're okay with what you choose when it comes to leveling up. Much like how Mario chooses between HP, FP, and BP, health points, flower points, and badge points, Loaf chooses between health, will, and resolve points. Health is as it says, will is the resource for attacks, and resolves are the numeric points for specials. Now be careful, as you also have backpack upgrades and boon upgrades. You, however, can only max out one during your play session. You can do that, or neither, like me. Having max boon or max backpack takes away from the other, so choose wisely. I went with neither being maxed and had a balanced kind of game session. Hi, Syncweaver from the future. I just wanted to add a little bit of a thing in the gameplay section here. I totally forgot about the audience system. Basically, in Paper Mario, you had an audience that always watched your battles. And the same thing is done here, but via a live stream and this chat function that you see in the top right hand corner. You get to see how many people are watching, and you get to see the chat flow, I guess you could say. And sometimes the audience will ask you to do something, and if you fulfill that request, you'll get will points. Boons can change what you get from your audience, so take a look at those. I would say the only problem with the audience system is that not everything you succeed in with your action commands will give you more views, and I think this is kind of a bug. Anything that stops on green will get you more eyes on your live stream, but if you do anything else and you still succeed on it, you sort of lose audiences. But I hope they patch that out when the game does come out. Just know that the audience system is basically the same thing as the audience you get in Paper Mario. Now, on the outside of battle, we have the traditional partner abilities. These are the kind of abilities that help you traverse the world. Lint can dig, Yagi can bring platforms into the physical realm, and Chloe has a light that you can use as a light, or she can toss it to set things on fire. All are situational, and that's not a bad thing. I was just hoping to see someone who can scan an enemy, or maybe say something about a town, just like the Goombas from the Paper Mario series. Or maybe someone who had a movement enhancement on the field, though that is made up for with early girl's rewards for doing her races, being rewarded shoes that allows for faster Naruto runs. All it means is that your partner is key to traversing the world. They're not so much as blocking your progression with the story does a well enough job in doing that, but they are very important in collecting all of the collectibles, finishing all the side quests, and basically completing the game. And it is the partners that opens the world up. Everything in Loaf's world is connected, and not just through the central town hub. No, like they're naturally connected. Lapwing Village is connected to the summit through the mines, while the Snow Town is connected to the summit through an ice cave. You'll find paths like these on your journey, and all of them need your partner's abilities to unlock them. Things really open up once you unlock the fast travel system. Allows for quick runs around the world when walking through the same forest over and over gets tiring, especially seeing how for those who are on the achievement side, you'll need that fast travel system for side quests, and there are a good number of them. All of your quests can be found here in the menu, and they are pretty organized quite well. I'd encourage doing them. If not for the story, you do it for the rewards, since some of them will absolutely help Loaf and his friends with some extra oomph. Characters with this annoyed expression over their heads have your side quests, though I do have to question why the annoyed squiggles for quest icons. I hope they do know that this makes it look like they're annoyed with something. I mean, doing most of them already, I know that some just have errands and honestly minding their own businesses until Loaf comes up and says something to them. Well, some of them do give golden food stuff, so it's best to do some of them at the very least. Food is your standard healing item, by the way. Health, will, resolve, it covers all of that. The golden ones are just more powerful, and I have to say this, there is not a lot of room for your food stuff. Now, unless I missed it, there doesn't seem to be a bank system for food. Mario had one, so I was hoping to see one here, and I have to critique them here for this one, because RPG gamers are hoarders. We save everything that might be needed for strong bosses, side quests, secret bosses, and even the last boss, which are known to have multiple phases. But if I'm not missing anything, try to keep the golden ones on hand for emergencies. Trust me. Oh, and keep doing side quests. One of them expands your item storage for sure, and it really is helpful. Oh, and I do appreciate that this game has some accessibilities when it comes to color blindness. With games coming out with many colors, a colorblind mode is very welcomed. I myself am not colorblind, but it does help some friends of mine who are fans of paper RPGs. I have to say WildArts really did well with functionality. The battle system is smooth, there aren't too many graphical glitches, though there was this one glitch where I got caught in battle and somehow ended up under the water. Now, since the surface has this fall zone and I was under that fall zone, when I jumped, I ended up in this perpetual death loop that had me take my first game over. I'm not counting that, I did not die once in this game, I'm going to call a mulligan. The situation may be unique here since there aren't too many chances for an enemy to initiate a battle and be directly over some water. I'd move this guy if I were them. Might be a bit of a hazard if I can easily get caught in this. There's also this glitch where I was powering up my special with the same button you use your partner's abilities with. Somehow Yagi was meditating during the battle. It was odd, I thought perhaps it was a feature of him powering up my special, but it just doesn't seem right to me. I'm sure that after some time they'll address and fix those bugs, and again, I knew beforehand with the press copy I had, I was going to have some bugs, none of which broke the game. This wasn't that, but besides this, I think everything functioned fine. I'm just going to chalk up the forest thing as maybe some sort of loading or data issue. In terms of gameplay, Born of Bread is above the AAA standard, which I guess isn't saying much. I mean, let's take Starfield for example. That game needs a lot of mods. And then there's Diablo 4 that I've been playing recently. The game design is horrible, but good on you, WildArts Studios Incorporated. You made a grade A, if not better than AAA, functioning game. It's been a long ride for most of us Paper Mario fans. This year, they announced a remake of the best Paper Mario game Nintendo has ever made, and right as they announced that game, I get to play this amazing one inspired by the very series. I know I said nostalgia and memories can be the key to something great, and I also know that games made from a time where you had fun as a child could end up making something bad. But this isn't the case here. Yes, nostalgia was the biggest factor for me playing this game, and yes, I will never experience that feeling of when I played Paper Mario for the first time, or how the 1,000-year door was there during a very dreary and horrid time of my life, but nonetheless, I did have fun with them. In fact, I used footage from my own gameplay for the Paper Mario comparisons, and I have to say, they both held up pretty well. They knew what they wanted to be back and forth. I deem them timeless games anyone can go back and play anytime. It's like starting a new game in Chrono Trigger. You know you're going to have a good time, but this aversion to nostalgia isn't unwarranted. AAA companies have been using that to a degree to make money. It's not like we didn't know that Spyro, Crash, any of the Final Fantasy remakes, Resident Evil, or the mini versions of The Last of Us wasn't for profit in the long run. They came out with Crash 4, Final Fantasy 7 is evidently going to have a different story to it, and Resident Evil 4, the remake, looks amazing. They remade Metroid Prime, one of my favorite Metroid games of all time. I know these companies are only doing this because they want to make profit, right? We give them money, they save our timeless memories in past games by making remakes or remasters. And don't get me started on how the gaming industry isn't good at saving their legacy games. A lot of the games that people my age remember, well, some of them can't be accessed anymore. We can't play those games anymore. They're just erasing them. I honestly think they need to have a central network that saves all retro games that become 15 or 20 years old. A library of old games that can be purchased or played via a physical copy or be able to download them. And have a central console of some sort that can play all of them upscaled or in their original settings. Some would call that a PC in emulation, but a separate console would work, you know? It takes courage and hard work for indie companies to make games like Born of Bread, A Hat in Time, Hades, Celeste, Cuphead, Hollow Knight, Undertale, Pizza Tower, Stardew Valley, and Sea of Stars. Hell, the most famous indie game of all time was purchased by Microsoft and was basically the most played indie game. Minecraft, made with hopes and dreams from people who wanted to make a game they wanted to play. The memories one has for a game can lead to something greater, and unfortunately, the main series for Paper Mario has not been great for many years. It's almost like they needed the remake, The Thousand Year Door, just to remind themselves what a good game was, but it's nuance and truth. Miyamoto had several pushes and rules for Paper Mario, and as much as I want to give credit for his idea for Mario in the beginning, his interference in recent Mario RPGs may be the reason why they just didn't work out. The keyword is may, because again, it's all nuance. The full story may not come to light when it comes to Paper Mario, but from what I've heard, Miyamoto was also disappointed in some of the recent Paper Mario games. It's almost like the person they had in charge had no creative idea on how to make a Paper Mario game, and that sucks. A lot of these indie games coming out are way more positive than any of these manipulating AAA games, and be it from me to judge what the hell is going on in the East with their near gambling addiction patrons. When I see a game like Genshin Impact, I see a waste of potential. When I see Diablo 4, I see a lack of talent behind the development. When I see games that come out free to play, I see corporate trying another scheme. When I see Born of Bread, I see a good game with positive influences. I see fun, very engaging without artificial fat like battle passes. If they come out with DLC, hell, I'm gonna buy it. And the team seems very nice with a pure goal. I gave this game a rating of full attention, and they did not disappoint. This game deserves the best rating I can give it, a buy and own rating. Studios like these need all the support they can get, and I hope to see more of Loaf and his friends, and perhaps a sequel. I also hope to see more games come from WildArts Studios, as they certainly do have talent. Games like these need to be fostered, and hopefully shared with other generations, though that may be a harder case. AAA games are just too hard to put down due to their design. Born of Bread is a traditional game where saving and putting it down is very easy. I respect the fact that this game respects your time with no strings attached. I want to say thank you to Dear Villagers for the press copy, and the people over at WildArts Studio Inc for the chance to let you all know that Born of Bread will stay in my library for years to come. I just need to get that physical copy because digital copies are just not safe enough for me. And lastly, I want to tell you guys something of a story and why I really wanted to share this game. Born of Bread really reminds me of my youth. It was a time where things was really uncertain at home and at school. There was bullies, there were family issues, but the Thousand Year Door kept me sane. It kept me on a path of imagination and creativity. I have a lot to think when it comes to Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door. And I know a lot of people are going to say that's just a sob story, but it's an actual thing. Sometimes a video game can save people's lives if they're in not a best state wherever area they are in. That's why I needed to play this game. That's why I needed to talk about this game. So go out, get your hands on this game. Buy Born of Bread. It is out right now on Steam and other platforms. It's a good one. And if there's other games that you wish for me to look at, other indie games, please leave it in the comments down below. I may actually take your suggestions. Don't forget, I do have a Patreon if you want to support the channel directly. I don't have membership yet because I haven't reached the quota for a YouTube channel. And don't forget to subscribe, you know, the regular shindig. But I am glad that not only is Born of Bread the first review on the Indie Observer, but it is the first one that deserves the pay to own. Thank you very much, and I'll see you guys next time.